Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out, let people know I've gone live. And in the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And surprisingly, in my little bit of getting things done in that practicality of my own life today, that I was able to delve into some topics, actually, my own topics in my own life, and kind of hang out there a little bit today and kind of pick up in a different perspective. I don't like to go into the future, right? In speculating and stuff. When I first woke up to some of these ideas, they're kind of led me in a spectrum of thinking. And so I moved along in that direction, and I'm that person that just kind of follow me. I don't follow large groups, though as a teenager, I was that groupie. Donny Osmond, David Cassidy, the Bay City Rollers, in that fanatical groupie kind of feeling. As I've moved forward, a little bit, you get into those relationships and you get to understand emotions a little bit better. You get to understand that giving and taking from others, in that also depending on somebody else. And in order to depend on somebody else, lots of times you have to let go, right? And you have to just trust that person who's presenting an idea. Sometimes it might not be the right idea, but because they're presenting it in a way that it seems true, that it's right, they have that authoritative kind of I know better. And because you don't have that confidence in your own capabilities, lots of times we hand that over to other people and we move by other people's directives and not necessarily the way we would move if we could dictate how things should go. Not everybody is meant to be a leader, right? And lots of followers out there truly should be leaders. In my lifetime, I have met a few, and by their own choice, they've decided to live that quiet life for themselves. I don't know why. Right? I was referred to by Google as a wanderer. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, in that idea of being distracted by everything. But when you look at the world and you look at people, I see you there, Eugene. Thank you for coming in. When you look out at the world that way, you could see that everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has a different idea about how things are. And so I wanted to get a clear picture for myself, really, because I've never really asked myself, like I said, I don't hang out, right, in the future. And so I don't usually reflect on that because I want to be working with people who have coping mechanisms, who have flashbacks or triggers that have been labeled in some way or rejected, and right, I have to say, people who come from traumatic experiences, who grew up in dynamic families, right? We're talking trauma here. And I have to recognize that that's where I can bring to the table. I can't be an expert in everything, and I'm not even an expert in those like beyond, right? I learn from people that would make me look like a one-celled amoeba. And that's the truth, and I'm okay with that, because sometimes all you need is that one person to get you into the direction of who that expert is, right? Who that one person who could shine on your life in a way that it would make it so, right, we're not coping in bad ways, and that we actually enjoy our lives. It's what, right? And it's not always feasible, but that's the outlook that we're supposed to be moving towards. That's the destination. We're creating the best human being we possibly can, and that comes with the best life, right, that you possibly can. And not just a best life because you can, but the best life for you and the best life for me. And, this is not something, I think, in a way, I always tried in my small little possibilities and opportunities, and, things that came across my path that gave me an idea, a creative thought that maybe I could utilize and experience to have a bigger experience. And that's what creatives do. They see beyond that way. But I look at it as looking at the possibilities. I don't look at it as looking at the future, right? And I'm thinking today, should I be looking at it that way? Looking at life, at the possibilities? You know, I look at my dreams and my goals that I set for myself each year like that. And I tend to get my goals and my little short list of dreams taken care of consistently every year. But a lot of that is coming from my imagination when I'm doing the research, when I'm right in the parks and reservation services, and I'm looking at different sites, and I'm throwing myself into the experience that I'm going to have, which is only possibly 6 months away. And in my imagination, am I manifesting it that way? Because I'm looking at it as a possibility, right? And I'm treating it like my goals. So my goals then I am treating like the possibilities in my life. And, I gave it some thought, maybe I've been going about it wrong, you know. And I have to look at my limitations in a realistic manner, and my capacity to push myself a little bit outside where I'm comfortable, because, right, we know that's where the lessons lay, right? So we I can make that kind of movement, but when you don't see the movement itself outside of what I'm doing in the moment, which is only in the moment, it's not in the future, right? So it's in my imagination, possibly. that I'm creating my future, and I should be in my imagination more. But I'm such a realist, and I find that when I'm in my imagination, I'm being taken away, right? I'm being distracted in the things maybe I feel like I have to do when I don't necessarily have to do that. I guess that's kind of been a lesson for me going along, but it's in that experimentation, right? So, you get these ideas and you play with them a little bit and you see what works for you. Sometimes you hit it good, sometimes you make a mess of it, but you just start over again. A new experience, a new try, right? Try something else until finally you hit on something. But it makes you wonder, right? Why it's got to be so hard, why there's got to be a lot of question in it and a lot of research, and right, because it is in the experience, and it's in the experience where the experience lies. You know what I mean? Like you're compacting experience in everything that you do. You get a little bit better until you're so good that you can go for the Olympics and grab yourself a gold medal. But that doesn't mean that I want to be the lifetime student and not in practice. So this is the project for this year, in starting to move into a direction where I could actually be of some practical use. I'm smiling right now because when I started my live tonight, I said, mentioned the word practicality. And when I looked down, I saw the word practical as soon as I said it. And then just now I used the word practical and I looked down and there's that word. I mean, how often do I use that word practical? But that's the idea. It's the practicality of things. We shouldn't have to fight for things. We shouldn't have to struggle for things. Things should be a little bit like household, like, right? Getting the housework done, that little bit of effort that you put in to be organized and to be on top of things. And right. And there is a benefit and a prize, a stick with the bag at the end, which is a nice clean house that doesn't stress you out and that you don't have to do for a couple of days because you did a good job today, right? But sometimes we really don't think that we are very far ahead in where we're supposed to be in the moment. And I think we just put too much effort, too much steam in it, too much of that questioning, right? Right? And that can be disillusional. I believe, right? Life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. I got that, right? And I feel it, and I feel good living that way because it's tied in to this spirit, this experience of partnering with myself, right? That there is no excuse for not knowing, right? That we're at that stage right now in our evolution where there are lots of answers. We know what we're supposed to be doing, and those that right are not moving that way won't be moving that way. And it's as simple as that. And I don't even know if I'm moving that properly that way because, again, the questions, there aren't enough answers out there to give us that direction. But the idea is not for all of us to go in the same direction, but to experiment and have a whole bunch of different directives. And that's the word, right? Those directives. It's just a lot of not knowing and waiting for directives. And if there's one thing I've learned, you don't wait, right? You make that movement. You set your goals. You set your dreams. You get into your imagination when you don't have the resources, the tools, the weather's locked you in. It's warming up here in Winnipeg. We've been in like minus 40s with the wind chill for a few days. I'm looking forward to it warming up. They said it even might rain snow tomorrow. We'll see about that, but I'm looking forward to having a little bit milder temperature. Maybe I'll go for a walk. I have some chores that I need to get done. But yeah, so let's just bring it right back to the main branch of the tree. And that reminds me, Cindy, let's just grab those cards. So let me just come back to this idea, because it seemed like it was something that needed to be touched on. But maybe it was touched on because it's gone now. Let me have a sip of my coffee. Eugene, I hope your night is going good. I hope everybody is having a great start to their week and getting home and putting your feet up and get to relax a little bit, right? Do a little bit of something that you want to do. And I'm grateful that you just kind of wanted to pop in here and hang out with me for a few minutes. It's much appreciated. It is most appreciated. It's always amazing to have company in what I'm doing. It really does. I think the YouTube community is absolutely amazing. I'm just so grateful to be a part of it, right? And it's something, I could have easily made a choice or not made a choice, and it would have been a different story altogether, right? And whether it was a better story or a more difficult story, or a story, right, that I was just living my life and all these experiences that I had in the past, I don't know, half a dozen years or so, that, that these wouldn't have happened and I wouldn't have been any worse for wear in what I didn't know. And that was a possibility too. All it takes is one choice, one decision, and putting that little bit of physical effort into achieving whatever that choice was. Just trusting. The first thing I said is everything's going to be okay. You didn't know what I had. No idea. It was crazy town for me. I had no idea what was going on, and I just kept repeating, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going. I had no idea whether it was going to be okay or not, but I did feel that everything was going to be okay. In my strange way of thinking, I looked at it like an adventure. It's that curious, creative mind of mine that, it just, what's next? Right? And when it said, follow me, I followed it. Right? And I was dazzled and amazed, right? I was dazzled and amazed. I was screwed up for a while. I was frustrated for a while. I was heartbroken for a while. I was angry for a while, right? And then you look back at it, you just shake your head. Just shake your head and smile, right? And just We're going in. We're moving. We're moving. We might not be running into it 100 miles an hour, but we're moving. We'll take those baby steps, partly out of curiosity, partly because that's the direction we're supposed to be going in. Okay, let me have a sip of my coffee. Mm. Oh, it was too hot for me to drink when I started my live. I was kind of rushing around. It was just, oh, I can get my dishes done. So it's always nice to go to bed knowing that the house is all clean and ready to destroy again. Okay, you guys, you know the score here. 54 powerful words. If you've never been into my lives before, this is a deck that I put together, right? This is the prototype. I just sent that off to a friend. There we go. They're just powerful words, right? 54 powerful words. And it took me over a year to get this deck done. I worked with each word every day for a week, and then of course, after the deck was done, it's part of my regular routine on my lives now and in my podcast. um and it's helped me out so much, right? Lots of times these little bits of amazing information, come across our path, and we don't necessarily hold on to them. Like, we don't hold on to that information. Lots of the times it doesn't even stick at all. It's just like it goes in one ear and it goes out the other ear. Sometimes it just happens, and right, you don't even know it's happened. And yet it could be the most important insight that we've ever come across in our entire lives. But because we don't pay attention, right, that we miss it. And it's in that repetitiveness that I find that something is given the opportunity to sink in. Like today, I had a certain video suggested to me. Like, after refreshing my feed, it got suggested to me like 4 or 5 times, right? I'm just, oh, really? Huh? If it's this many times, I guess I better, right? I better go in and watch it. Now, I can't remember what it was, but it was a good bit of information in that content. It might not have been the entire post, but there was a portion or a sentence or an experience in that post that impacted me. And of course, my short-term memory, I can't even remember why it was, so I don't even know why I used it as an example. But it is in that repetitiveness that we sometimes get the message that, you know, uh, but we don't always get it, right? Sometimes in that stubbornness, they'll give you one shot at it. Comes across your path, you don't notice it. Oh well, right? See you next year, right? Or the next lifetime. And you might miss the most pertinent piece of information you could ever hold on to. But, if you pay attention, and that's the idea with these cards, it's just a powerful word. But if you keep that word in mind for the next 24 hours and just see how it comes into your life, in your conversations, in your experiences, in your thoughts or in your emotions, or in somebody else's in your very close vicinity, right? And it'll give you an idea of, right, how much you actually do miss. Lots of times you go, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. Well, you could have known that like 100 times today and a couple of 100 times yesterday, but because you're so focused on that butt or that video game or, right, whatever it is that you just focused on, that you didn't even notice. Sometimes we're just walking around all spaced out, and it goes by our, just because we're spacing out into nothing, and we do that too. Oh my goodness. Me and my sister Carolyn, we were big at spacing out when we were kids. Just be all staring up. Oh my goodness, the teachers, and I don't know how I was able to do it in class because I was so focused on who was going to be at the spitballs at me next that, I didn't imagine that I could just disappear in my zoning out. And that was the daydreaming, because it was always, because anytime that I was called out of it, Cindy, right? Trying to get my attention, that I would always remember where I was in my imagination in that moment, in that thoughts. It was usually somewheres else. But yeah, it makes me curious to wonder why I would allow myself to disappear like that when in natural form I am very hypervigilant, and as a student I would have been, right? I like eyeballs on the back of my head waiting for somebody to mess with me. I'm not that person. I haven't been that person for decades in actuality, and it's wonderful because it was the people that came into my life that helped me to relax. That, these people helped me to recognize the beauty in life that I thought they were introducing me to. But right, I was always, what do you call that, the club promoter. I was the one that was getting the adventures together. But for me, it was having the backup of whoever, and the backup, whoever, was just excited. Somebody wanted to be the club promoter and just do it. And I enjoyed that. I thrived in that, being a creative. That's what we do. And it was a good time, in all honesty. I have to consider that, my whole life wasn't right. I've had a lot of amazing experiences, a lot of wonderful, dear relationships, and I have no problem in giving credit for my positivity to these wonderful people that I was able to spend time with, people who accepted me for the person that I was, because that was all that I could be, right? I couldn't dress up as somebody else, right? All I had was the person that I was. And so, in being able to do that, and not lots of people are able to do that because they have forms, like a form and a visual they have to uphold. They have to have intelligence. But for me, I was already like at my lowest of the lows. I was just grateful that people could understand a conversation that I was having. At least in my own mind, that's how I felt, right? But as you get to meet people and hang with people, you get to recognize that, what, in the end, everybody has issues, right? And we miss out on so much of the beauty that every single individual has, because we're so focused on what's ugly, what's not good. And I wouldn't want to be with anybody that was 100%. I used to say to my husband all the time, we go out with his friends and stuff, and they'd say, "How can you manage to be married to a guy like that?" And I would just look at him and say, "Oh my goodness," I says, "no man's any good without a little bit of a-hole in him," right? And that's the truth, because for myself, because in my own experience and being the fixer, you always think that you can change somebody. And, that's not possible. You have to allow people to want to change for themselves. And it's not because anybody put the pressure on or there was manipulation. But of course, influence is always um, available in the idea that you can be the example, you know, for somebody else. The idea is, the person that you want for yourself, that's the person that you have to be for others. And you'll attract that, right? Okay, I don't know where I was going with that. Let me have another sip of my coffee and we'll grab a card and we'll call it a night. It's a Monday, you guys. We're just starting the week. Is this the week before Christmas? I do believe we're going into it now, another few days. And yeah, it's pretty settled for me. I got it all done. I'm just doing the little touch up, the few little things that I've got to get done. And also I've got a little bit of, I don't like the official stuff, right? The the yeah, just official stuff that you got to do in life. But you got to do what you got to do, right? We're creating the best human being we possibly can. So I guess I got to put a little bit of that, what do you call it? Um, when you don't want to put a down payment, sweat equity. There you go. A little sweat addict. Yeah, get that work in, right? Yeah, contribute a little bit. I always try, you guys. Okay, here we go. I don't know why I always pull from the middle of the deck. I always do. It seems maybe tomorrow we'll pull from the end or something. Here's the word. What do we got? Oh, this is a great word. I love this word. This is a word that has tripped me up. And it's tripped me up probably until about 30 years ago, where I had an experience. We got the word trust right off the hop. Let's read what it says. Trust is being willing to let go of control, right? Trust is being willing to let go of control. And this is a difficulty, I think, for most humans in general. And I think we have been just kind of brought up in the past few generations to, right, we're getting to see too much of the world. We're seeing too much of what's different. Up until a couple of hundred years ago, your family might have lived in the same village for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Now we live in a world, you'll hop on a plane and, go to Africa, India, England. You just go anywheres that you want and you can just pull in all those traditions and those cultures and those ideas into your system. And it can confuse you because you might have just lived with one idea in your belief, right? Let's just say you're, right, Russian Orthodox, right? And you decide to go on a trip and you get introduced to Ugon in the African god, right? Or there's all kinds of different religions out in the world that we've not ever even thought of. And just of recently, I've gotten to know a few more, just enough to get me into a conversation. But these ideas of other people's way of thinking, other people's way of believing. And then when we're going to these different places and we got the news and we got the internet and we see the tensions and the distrust in the world, and it affects us as just regular Joe Blow as just a nobody, because we are so connected to everyone and everything. We live in a world where in this moment we're this close to each other, right? And so we're trying to find a place where we can trust in a world where we don't trust. Lots of people think that trust is earned, right? And not to give trust right away. It's not deserved right away. For myself, I love to trust right off the hop, right? I give it to you. I let you know my weaknesses and my strengths. And in that relationship of walking this path together, it's going to be in your care of that information about me. Do you use it as ammo to steer me in this direction? Do you use that information about me and make me feel bad about myself, to bring up the guilt and the shame and to point out my inadequacies? Sorry, my inadequacies? Or do you use that information to help build me up when I find myself weak in those moments of my weaknesses? Or when I've been triggered, do you hang with me and support me in a way that doesn't re-trigger me or make the situation worse, or even better yet, that you love me and care for me so much that in that moment of knowing that information that I shared with you, that you could use that to bring back the system to a calmer state. You know, we don't we don't give our trust easily out there, but I don't have a lot to hide in my life. I will own up when I'm faced with those wrongs in my life, and I'm not going to say that there aren't wrongs in my life, because there are things in my life that I feel bad about, that I will never have the opportunity to course correct. But at the same time, I'm not going to beat myself up with a wet noodle about that. Well, it's a bad analogy, right? But I'm not going to beat myself up about that. But it's only in the recognition that in this moment, right? Ignorance is no excuse. So from this moment forward, right? I understand that I have responsibilities to myself and to how I show up, because obviously, I'm here 6 days a week. That, I hold up my responsibility in sharing my truth, right? And do it in a way that's genuine, so that people, if they hang with me for any length of time, that they can feel my system. And I'm good with that, right? That you feel me out in a way that helps to promote that idea of trust. And it's important. And not only is that trust between us and other parties, but that trust has got to be with ourselves first, right? Because I can't come to the table with something that, right, if it's hearsay, I will say that it's hearsay. I will say that this is not mine. This is what I heard, or I don't believe this, but this is right, to make sure that I'm not covering my bases. It's not that idea, but it's to get the person that is building that trust with me and has built up a little trust in me, that they know that they have to use their own minds and their own right set of values to dictate by feeling me out and feeling what I'm saying out to see whether or not it's true for you too. And yeah, I don't know. Trust is a beautiful word. I've had it in my life a few times, but also I've had it in my life a few times when it's been kind of right dropped in my lap or dropped on the ground, and it hasn't been cared for the way that it was dreamed or imagined that it would be cared for. But when I share out there, right, I'm not sharing in a way to say, don't you ever hurt me, don't you ever use this against me, right? But I'm going to perk up when you do, and I'm going to feel out in you why, right? And that why is going to dictate how I feel about it and how I'm going to move with that, right? And lots of times it's just, right? Didn't mean it, right? Put their foot in their mouths, right? There'll be another time, caught them in a bad moment, right? And we don't always want to be making excuses for others because again, uh, ignorance is no excuse, and we have to be responsible in where we get things wrong, and we have to be responsible in how we show up as being the example for others, right? That we have to be better examples for others, and we have to be caring in being that example for others because, right, people are looking to them as examples, and sometimes there are no other examples around, and it's hard to build trust when you can see for your very own eyes that something is kind of crazy town. That is something that, you shouldn't believe. And then they try to explain something else or teach something else, but they didn't get the last one right, right? I couldn't trust on that last bit of information. Why am I expected to trust in this piece of information? Right? So yeah, I come in and I flow. So I come in for my own lessons too when I do my own lives. And in the beginning it was a concern for me that I would be that person who'd stick their foot in the mouth and have to do lots of course correcting and apologizing, and I'd be so embarrassed and so ashamed that I wouldn't want to show up the next day. But it is in that repetitiveness, that coming in every day in that practice, that eventually, right, we'll hit it right. We'll find that courage to bring up that little piece of information that we've been holding on forever, but didn't know how to bring it to the table, right? And lots of us are like that. But the idea is if it's meant for you to present it, then you've got to present it. But if nobody's asking you, if it's just some information for yourself, right? And you don't think it's going to be useful for anybody else, then that's fine too, right? To each one of us, we have to feel out, and there is no playbook for living life, right? There's a lot of dictation out there. There's a lot of expectation out there. There isn't enough imagination, dreaming, goal setting, and working together, right? And that takes time. And I think we're getting to a stage that, maybe we're going to start getting a little bit better in that, right? We're always unsure of what we don't know. But once we've spent some time with it, we feel a little bit safer, right? We can make a little bit more space for something else. different to come into our lives. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. We'll see you tomorrow.